Hello, everybody, and welcome to Celestial Chronicles. Joining me, the wonderful Paul and the legendary retro doc Gary Akers to talk about classic episodes of Doctor Who and many other things. So make sure you keep an eye on us because there's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming as the weeks and months go by. You know, we've signed up for decades, haven't we, to do this? This is a long time deal. I've got you tied down.
We signed a lifetime contract. Basically.
We already have our 30th anniversary show planned, everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to be in a big triangle.
I'll have a long beard or something.
We'll be watching John up on the screen as he, tells us what to do.
John will be CGI by that point of what was going to happen, and we'll be animated or something like that.
We'll have some missing episodes that they'll discover decades from now, and
we'll have to go back and do them all again. That's what's going to happen.
So today we're talking and discussing and reviewing Edge of Destruction. So we'll get into it today. At the end of the story, we'll do sort of our rating out of 10 on how we find the episode. So just to start us off, guys, what are your thoughts initially on Edge of Destruction? So do you want to start, Paul?
Well, initially, I always like to think when I first saw this, and I think I saw it in the 80s when they were doing the rounds of pirate copies that you used to get from friends, etc. I can just say to the BBC, I bought it 3 times, so I can say that already. Pirate's fine. So I've paid my dues on that one. But so I'm not going to go to prison. But so first I saw the early 80s, and I actually found it a weird one, really, to be honest. I do really like it, and I think it's a great showcase for the characters and for the beautiful TARDIS set that we have. I think it really shows off the set, even with that wonderful flat photographic roundel wall, which looks superb, and the way it's shot by Frank Cox, and I think it's Richard Martin as well, when it's dark in places, quite shadowy. It's a very creepy set. And I've always thought, and it's something the new series don't do, the TARDIS doors, the security of the TARDIS with those doors and they open in space and all that kind of stuff, and always sees the light coming through. And the creepy atmosphere of this, is there an entity on the ship, or is it the TARDIS warning? What's going on? They don't really know. And it's a lovely kind of a psychological drama going on. You don't know what's happening, and they're fighting against each other. Great performances, but it's just a bit weird. That's all we'd say.
Yeah. Gary, what do you think?
I agree. I also want to say that Paul's comment about the getting the VHS copies. I thought I still have the brown paper bag with the grease spot underneath that I remember getting this episode like in the alley at midnight. Somebody there was an exchange. There was an exchange of currency to get this episode before it came out on DVD. But no, you're right. This is a very kind of surreal episode. For some reason, as I was watching this, rewatching it yesterday, especially in the first episode, I thought this is kind of like one of Agent Cooper's dreams from Twin Peaks, where everybody is just kind of like, weird. They're unconscious, and the next instant they're standing, and all this stuff, and just the kind of weird with the scissors and all of this. The narrative unfolds kind of really slowly. It's almost like a stage play. I mean, it's mounted like a stage play. And once you kind of get that concept stage play in your mind, that's really kind of all I saw during the rest of it, how they were, positioned to each other and everything. You could easily stage this episode on put it on a stage. Yeah. A lot of, only thing I'll finish up saying for now is I think that if you were to watch this episode cold without either having seen any, Hartnell before, or actually I'd go so far to say that if you hadn't seen the first 2 stories, I think that you'd kind of be absolutely lost, because I think so much of this story and how it ultimately impacts the characters and how they're acting during it really depends on you having seen Unearthly Child, and the Daleks. This isn't one of those Doctor Who episodes that you can just kind of grab off the shelf and watch it context free. This really is the kind of culmination of those first 13 episodes, which are kind of its own unit, because then going forward, things are a lot different. But seen in isolation, I'm not really sure, what you'd think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to differ from what you both have said. I really do like it. I think this is what they would call now a bottle episode, where they're trying to save costs. They're going to keep it within a particular set, and it.
Well, just to be timey-wimey, John, they based this on Midnight, didn't they? They did Midnight. So it's claustrophobic, It's like
yeah, exactly, yeah. RTD gets everywhere, doesn't he? We thank him for all of it. And
he's going to steal. You steal from the best.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love as well is, there's two things in this episode I really like. One is Barbara. I really do love the bit where she challenges the Doctor. And I do like the end of the story where it's not resolved. And the Doctor says a lovely quote when he sits down next to her, and he says, something along the lines of, as we learn about each other, we learn about ourselves, and then they go out there. And you're kind of right, because all of the last few stories, there's that element of trust still, do they trust each other? And it all comes to kind of a head in this story. But going forward, you see, once you get into Marco Polo, they've almost kind of built that rapport with each other to an extent.
Although Hartnell, when you get to Marco Polo, is still a bit grouchy, to say the least. He's still got that lovely spikiness still.
Hartnell grouchy? What do you mean?
Well, he's the grumpy one. Yeah. And exactly. Patrick Troughton's a floaters. Remember that? Anyway, so what I can say was, the opening sequences. I love that the end of the Daleks into that with the fantastic takeoff of the TARDIS, all relaxing. There's a massive explosion. They all get thrown to the floor, which is really lovely. And is it Norman Kay that did the music for this as well, or is it someone different? Or is it just some Kay's music?
I think it was Norman Kay.
But it's got a really interesting. The music's quite atmospheric as well. The soundtrack of it.
Yeah, and I do like, the first episode where you've got that they're slowly coming to, and you have Susan first of all. And you got Barbara, and then you got Susan, and there's the amnesia that's played up for a while, isn't it? And I think that's done really well. And I also think Hartnell has some lovely scenes. He's so good in the close-ups, isn't he?
Yeah,
the speech about the universe and all that. The forming of a planet, superb, really beautifully delivered.
That goes to the point I was making before about how I kept seeing, kind of imagining if I was like in a theater audience watching this on stage, and especially how, even though it's a TV show, for that scene there, Paul, they dim all the lights around him, and so basically he's a spotlight, which of course they do on for theatrical, for theatrical productions a lot, so the audience can just focus in on him, and they don't need to do it in this scene, but that's a very kind of theatrical way that scene is staged. If I know that the episode 1 is by Richard Martin, who I think went on to direct Dalek Invasion of Earth, right?
He also directed half of the Daleks as well with Christopher Barry.
Right. I actually think for some reason
he did the Web Planet as well, but that's another story. But
I love the Web Planet. I think that
so do I.
But I actually prefer the second episode, only because I think the second episode makes more creative use of the space. It seems like, especially because episode 1 is, John, as you said, it's so slow moving. It's almost like people are kind of like sleepwalking. I'm not commenting on the acting. I mean, just they're moving so slowly. The way that Barbara will tell Susan to go do something, and she'll just kind of stand there, for about 20 seconds until Barbara says, "Well, get going." And the whole episode is like that, where it's just kind of like there's a disorientation going on. I understand, why at the end of the day why they do that. But it just seems like episode 1 is kind of slow moving. It just kind of focused on the console area, that I just really liked the second episode, which I think made use of the whole space.
Yeah.
And boy, do I love the size of the console room.
Oh yeah.
I do miss that. I know that you've in the current era you've got an enormous TARDIS interior, but there's something about that for me that just feels about the right size for the TARDIS console room. I like that, and I love the doors leading into the other room with the chair and the seats. They're like the sunbathing chairs, aren't they? You know,
you really only kind of got into that again.
They're back in the chase at some point, and I think the Web Planet as well. I think,
You really only kind of got into that again during the Davison era.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting how, as you said, I mean, we don't want to jump to talk about like the ending yet, but the fact that you have Ian, who's kind of wandering around, acting kind of, alternately childlike and bewildered, sleepwalking like he's in a trance. Susan is basically full psycho.
Exactly.
But she learned that from her grandfather, didn't she?
Yeah.
I mean,
he's going
to kill Zal with a stone, and she thought, "Oh, I'm going to stab him with some scissors." She like that.
And that's a really intense scene. I mean, you go, "Wow, this is a children's show," and it's like, "Wow, kids, don't do that." You want a graphic underneath that scene going, "Kids, don't try this at home." With the scissors.
Yeah. It's like Quentin.
There'd be a trigger warning at the start for this episode, wouldn't there?
It's like Quentin Tarantino rock paper scissors in that TARDIS interior, isn't it? Just
and you have the Doctor wandering around confused and paranoid, increasingly paranoid. Barbara, as you said, John, is the only one really all throughout who kind of has. She goes from mild confusion, but then she has kind of her head on straight. For most of it. You're right. The best scene is where Barbara, chews out the Doctor. It says, like, "You're a stupid old man. You ought to get down on your hands and knees and thank us instead of, trying to boot us out." And they're reckon. Well, we'll leave the end because I think the ending deserves its own kind of focus. But it's very. Well, let me ask you: do either of you think that? Let's say that if you had come to this episode cold without the context of what their relationship was in the first 2 stories, and you just saw this, I'm going to watch a 60s Doctor Who story, it's this. Do you think that this almost is a requirement that you would have seen the first 2 stories for this?
I think you should watch the first 2 before you get us, at least Unearth the Child, if you can get access to it. And so, because I don't think the characters of Ian and Barbara particularly, or all the characters are representative as they are in the series normally. I know it develops the characters, but they're behaving so strangely. If you thought this is what they're like all the time, you wouldn't watch at all, I don't think. Because it's just a bit too weird,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you need to watch the first 2 just to build up just how good those characters are when they are themselves. And, this episode are great. There's a few things that I pick up on every now and again. So it's like, at this point Ian checks him and he says, heart seems all right. So at this point they're almost implying he's got one heart.
But Ian's he's not a doctor. He's a science
no, he's not a doctor. No,
and
exactly.
Great fencing as well, and fisticuffs. He's very good at that as well. So.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and Paul, we've talked about it before as well, and Gary, you can come in on this as well. But we've talked as well about there's almost insinuation that Susan's telepathic powers are quite powerful, and I would certainly say that this adds to it because she's the one that's kind of possessed or by the TARDIS more than anybody else, isn't she?
It's really only in the Sensorites that they really play that up, her telepathic powers. And I know that back in the day, obviously, they weren't approaching these stories with this kind of oh, well, let's kind of hint at this here and then we'll pay that off later. That's not how television production worked back then. But yeah, I was absolutely thinking that, Paul, they could have played up the fact that and emphasized her unearthliness, so to speak.
Yeah.
This would have been a really great way to do it. I mean, she could have been more the kind of, because you think in this situation, the TARDIS would have honed in on her basically as its kind of mouthpiece, so to speak. But clearly they weren't thinking in that kind of grandiose way.
But I think it's funny, Callum Foe's performance in this, I know it's slightly mannered, but it's a bit like the way she plays Susan in the pilot, because she's a bit stranger in that as well. So there's a definite more alien quality to her, whether that's being taken over by the TARDIS or just the fact she's fallen over and banged her head, what she's done, and they've all got vague concussion, from falling over. But I noticed though, Ian didn't fall over in the chair, did he? Because he's quite good at that in Earthly Child. He can do that kind of fall on his head.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's one scene where Hartnell falls, and then I thought, because I was watching him, and I thought that didn't look like a stunt double.
Yeah.
And I'm going, is that really Well, they really had Hartnell just fall. It's like, okay, here's where you fall onto the concrete Lime Grove floor, Bill. It's like, what?
It wouldn't.
And it's quite a violent fall as well, isn't it?
It
is.
A
violent fall, yeah.
But what I love as well? I do love, and this is me and my sci-fi stuff. I love the fact that they bring out the medicine and it's the bandage with the colours on it, and they basically say, as soon as they've all gone and it's white, the wound is healed and he's okay again. I love those little things they throw into it.
I'm a bit OCD about this, though, but the bandage is obviously on squint and it should be straightened up. It's like, can someone fix the bandage, please? Turn it around properly.
And can we talk about the fact that this, impossibly futuristic time and space machine apparently only has water and milk in the food machine?
No,
it's like really. I'd be going. I'd like. Where's the button for like wine spritzer or margarita?
Yeah.
It's like all we have is water and milk.
Rehypnol as well. The doctor can use to get them, knock them out as well. So it's like interesting.
and it's interesting as well because at this point they also make that point in the story. The Doctor sees the TARDIS as a machine.
Yeah, let's talk about
purely a machine. So because they talk about has the TARDIS got its own intelligence?
Yeah,
and
it's so advanced, John. It's so advanced. The spring gets jammed. That's how advanced it is.
But that's actually no. I'm glad you brought that up because that's absolutely worthy of discussion. Because then does that point to the fact that because you think the Doctor is in complete command? And later on, obviously not at this point in 1964, but decades and decades, it's always hinted maybe the Doctor actually had a hand in the creation of TARDIS.
Yeah.
But even putting that aside for now, clearly the Doctor even dismisses the idea that the TARDIS is sentient and self-aware. He says, well, it's capable of thinking only insofar as these processors and computers constitute thinking. So he dismisses that idea outright. So what does that say about, at this point, how much the Doctor himself knows about the TARDIS?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, in the first episode or the second episode, they mention about all the codes for the ship and all that the Doctor drops when he gets kidnapped by Carl to take him back to Cave of Skulls. So there's all the references, all these notebooks they have. So he's still trying to discover how it works. So there's a bit of dichotomy there whether if he stole it and didn't build it or didn't help design the TARDISes. And Susan was at the production, we'd say, should we call it TARDIS? I think there's that kind of implication that he's still learning about it, which I think is really, really interesting. And I've said this to John before in a previous video, that I love the idea, and I wish they kept this, that the fact he can't control the TARDIS is a genius idea, because it opens up to fantastic possibilities. And you can be anywhere you want, whereas now you can take the TARDIS to anywhere, anytime, any place on purpose, which is not as much fun, I don't think.
No, it's not. And I'm the same as you, because now obviously in New Who, and it's pushed later in the show that it's more of an organic being,
Yeah.
you know, not a machine as such, which I like. You know, I've got no problem with that. But it's quite interesting as well. He's still referring to the TARDIS as the ship.
Yeah,
you know, it's the ship, not the TARDIS, the ship. You know, and I think that again hits home that at this point the Doctor sees it as a machine only.
Right.
And a couple of other things I picked up on in the first episode as well was when the Doctor's on the floor and he's talking to himself while he's unconscious, and he basically says, "I can't take you back, Susan." So it's almost implying that Susan wants to go home, but he doesn't. So that's quite a nice little thread that they never.
Did you take that to mean Earth or Gallifrey?
I would say Gallifrey, yeah.
There's so many lovely bits in the first season, hints of, bits and Sensorites, bits and Marco Polo, all that kind of stuff, mentioning about where they come from, and the little tantalizing hints, which are really lovely, just enough to get you thinking about it, but not too much information, like he's now the timeless child, or what it's going to be,
Yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, this is, I mean, it's becoming clear. One thing that struck me last night as I was rewatching it is that, and I don't know that I've thought of it this way before. I kept thinking to myself, for something that is, in many ways, as you said, John, like a bottle episode, kind of a filler episode. It was the, fulfilling the order for the first 13 episodes, however you look at it. It's a pivotal episode in many ways in the development of the series, the development of the characters, because, keeping the conversation, focused on the TARDIS, this seems to be really the first time that the TARDIS itself, if we assume now, if we're kind of beginning to acknowledge that the TARDIS is sentient and self-aware, this is where the TARDIS itself becomes an actual character in the show. Not necessarily every episode. Sometimes it just lands and they go out and have their adventures. But it has to be said that from this point on, the TARDIS is the fifth character in the show.
Well, I would argue, a guy that I think it's been certainly from Unearthly Child, that moment when Ian touches the TARDIS and said it's alive. I think it was implied even then at that point it was maybe the extra character as well a little bit. But I agree with you, it got lost in sort of as the stories went on, didn't it? Which is a shame.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you would have picked up on as well, but I like the fact that they showed the picture of the planet Quinis.
Yes, in the fourth universe. Yeah,
exactly. And so, what people would always call big finish gaps. It's like, well, they'd been on adventures before they'd got to Earth. They'd seen other planets before they got to Earth. I like all of that. I like.
That's like what did Troughton? What was the Cyberman story? Was it Planet 13?
Planet 14. Yeah.
So like little things like that. But even though we'll all agree the TARDIS is a great machine, I think we need to kind of talk about that it still has kind of a ways to go when it comes to kind of like better ways to alert the crew they're in danger.
Yeah, just put something on the screen.
Why don't you just flash a message on the screen? Check the fast return switch, or you're dead.
Yeah,
something a little bit more direct like that.
To qualify to be to derive the TARDIS, you have to be a member of Mensa to be able to understand what's going on. So it was.
I mean, so basically, the TARDIS thinking to the TARDIS basically. If somebody says, "What's the plot of Edge of Destruction?" I think it would be, the TARDIS tries to drive the crew crazy while offering clues that Hercule Poirot would have a hard time deciphering.
Yeah. Well, it's like the crystal maze, isn't it? Really, it's great.
Yeah. It's like when you're talking about that, it's a lovely shot, and I really like it. It's where the clock is mounted, and what they've done to Ian's watch is very well done.
Yeah,
and I bet for kids watching that the first time, that must have been quite creepy. Yeah. But you're right. At the end, later on, you sort of get, time was taken away from us and given back. And I was trying to think that through, and I thought, but why would you melt the clock? And then I thought I need to just switch off that element of my mind and just think, like you were saying, Gary, you could, these days the TARDIS should just put something on the screen going, yeah, you need to fix that, otherwise we're going to explode any moment, you know.
I love the idea of the fast return switch in this, though, in terms of traveling back to the original location, and the reason why they're in danger could have got stuck. So they went back to the beginning. Is it the beginning of the universe they're implying, really?
Yeah.
It seems like the exact same thing then that was repeated in Castrovalva. Going back to the Big Bang.
Yeah, and
so you're saying the Master was involved, Gary? Is that what you're saying? Yes.
It all connects. Yeah, the Master was the force.
Hi, my friend.
The Master was the force that got in, that they were all expecting.
Yeah.
But I mean, what was Barbara's exact comment, John, where he says, time has been taken away, now it's being given back to us because all I could think of was, Barbara, it's a good thing you're not the science teacher then. Those kids would be lost.
Yeah. I was listening to that again. I don't know how many times over the years I've listened to that bit, and I'm like, oh, okay. Don't quite get that, but
Paul, can you see John putting that on a flow chart and parsing it out and trying with the arrows,
have you seen that?
Arrows and how to figure out that?
Have you seen that episode of The Simpsons where Bart explains to Homer about something and to go and do something? There's a big board with all the drawings on it. Yeah, he's like, I'd be exactly like that. Yeah,
I just start drooling, because I've just shut down.
But it's like, so the TARDIS is thinking to himself, okay, here's how I'm going to save you. I'm going to help you by making you amnesiac, by driving you crazy, and then by electrocuting you. Then it's okay, don't help us then.
We'll explode. Save us the pain because we've got neck ache.
I mean, I do think that they could have I saw what they were driving at, but I think they could have emphasized more of the fact that you kept waiting for them to make the leap. Okay, the only section of the console that's not electrified must be where the TARDIS wants to focus, because that's the safe segment. So what's here, because if the TARDIS wants to see, okay, the way to be safe is kind of like focused here, then it's like the next logical leap would be, then something here must be the problem that we need to fix in this section. You know what I mean? And obviously, there's a certain amount of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, looking back, because we know ultimately that is the problem. But you would think that would be the next logical leap, is like, why does the TARDIS want to focus right here? Because it is the only area that's been made safe.
Absolutely.
But then they don't take that next leap.
I think the thing is, Guy, if they did it too soon, the episode would last for 10 minutes.
Of course. Of course. I mean, I'm talking basically from like a story view and not like television production.
Yeah, and I do like Hartnell as well, where you get into the end of the episode, the first episode, and he basically says to Ian, and he's being, again, very alien as the Doctor, and he's basically saying, I've got no time for manners, essentially. I've got no time to say sorry for being rude, because something is seriously wrong. When
Hartnell says, "You're getting off the ship, Chesterton,"
I love that scene.
That's horrible. Yeah, really horrible.
And then, you know what? I went back and watched that a couple of times, Paul, because I thought the way that Hartnell played that and the kind of his tone of voice, he's kind of standing over Ian, and he says, "You're getting off the ship. Get up." With that and that little mannerism, I thought, wow, that's just so. That was just great.
And I'm a big fan of Hartnell's really, really spikiness. I think he gets softened after Marco Polo, etc. But I love the early stories when he's really, really spiky, because that's so much more interesting. Really
he says as well, when they're off to bed and they've had the Rohypnol, and he says to Ian, he says, what is it? He says, oh, effectively you're trying to jump ahead of me, and you never will be able to. Something like that. I was going to say, I'm always 2 steps ahead of you, basically. That's what he's saying, and putting him down, but also saying I'm the smartest guy in this area,
And you believe him. You believe him.
But that, to me, that just begs the question, because I kept waiting for Ian or Barbara to say, okay, given that, how could we have then sabotaged the ship? I mean, we're basically kind of like, monkeys throwing stuff at the walls, you know, in your view. How would we know how exactly to sabotage this ship? I kept waiting for one of them to say that.
And it's also like the end of the episode. I love it as well, because again, when you talk about the close-ups for Hartnell,
yes,
and the first Doctor, and he's checking them to make sure they're asleep, and he does that, cheeky little gig
with his hand. Yeah.
And then he's off to the console, and then it ends with the hands around the throat.
Yes.
So I mean.
And Mr. Chesterton now he's in his dressing gown, which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's what you do when you want to pull somebody away. You grab them by the neck. Yeah. Good job, Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you then move into the second episode, and again, this is that alien thing about the first Doctor again, where Ian attempts to strangle him, supposedly, and then, he falls over on the floor, and Barbara comes out, and the Doctor is refusing to help Ian. You saw what he did, it's you two, and we come to that scene that you were saying, Paul, about the fact that he's going to put them off the ship, because the logic was that he gave them all Rohypnol to see which one would strangle him first.
Well, even before he does that, and he comes out with the drinks, and Ian says, one minute you're abusing us, next minute you're being the perfect butler. The line is.
Yes.
And it's like, but they still take the drink. It's like, well, you don't take it, don't drink it.
Exactly. I kept going, Ian, okay, haven't you seen enough movies where if you're offered a drink, you reach over and you take the one that's closest to the person serving it to you? Don't take the
you do that
for
that Danny Kaye movie, The Vessel with a Pestle.
Around you. Yes.
And again, when you're right, we talked about that, about he's going to put them off the ship, and I think William Russell does it so well, where he's trying to get up and collapses back down, and he's like, "You're going to have to help me, Barbara." Again, sadly losing him this week, is a big loss, but when you see these little bits that he does in it, you just can see what a quality actor William Russell was.
Because he's really lost it, the character really lost it at this point. You really feel sorry for him, and Barbara has to look after him, because as you said earlier, Gary, he's slightly childlike because he's a bit confused and sort of vulnerable, and that comes across really well.
Yeah. And the scene back in the first episode, which I thought was very creepy, is where he's collapsed in the chair, and then all of a sudden you look over there, and then he's standing upright looking. That's very creepy.
Yeah.
That was well staged.
Yeah.
You're right, John. I think because of the loss of William Russell this week, I actually was kind of focusing more on him in this episode than the others. I was kind of watching the others in the group scenes. I was watching more William Russell to see what he was doing.
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
I was going to say about William Russell, but I forgot what I was going to say. Carry on, doesn't matter. I'll come back.
Yeah, that's fine. I think, with regards to the second episode as well, they also talk about, the column rising on the console, and about that said, what is it, along the lines of, it's an extent of its power thrust. So if that came out completely, it would be catastrophic. It would be the destruction of the TARDIS. It's kind of implied that. So, I do like that. And again, we're talking about how they're developing the TARDIS as from the early episodes. And I like the fact that they're spending time to talk to you about how it operates and, what the console does. And it's now you wouldn't get that. You'd literally go, oh, it flies through time and space. But there they take the time to talk to you about, oh, this does that. But I want the fault locator back as well in a new series. I want a big wall that's a fault locator.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say was when they get thrown off the ship, as I said, the doors are open and you can see light coming in. Are they going to? I mean, I know the TARDIS can have a bit of a, when the doors open, a bit of a shield around it, like they did in Holiday on Imo or whatever. But are they going to chuck Ian and Barbara into the sun? Where they've not landed, have they? They're not actually physically.
Exactly, yeah.
So
It's kind of like, yeah, it's like into a developing solar system.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And the way that they did that, the way that they did the explanation, I think is great because it explains a little, but it still retains all the mystery. Like if you were a child watching this, all you need to understand is there's some mysterious force under the console which is making it work. And so, okay, that's fine. That answers their question of, well, how does your console work? Yeah. It answers that, but still retains all the mystery, which is the exact right way to do it.
Yeah.
And but I didn't realize this until just now, John, as you were talking, because I'm thinking, okay, then how did Pertwee get the console out to put in his workshop during his first season that we saw him tinkering with, like in Day of the Daleks or Inferno or whatever? Yeah. Clearly he mastered that whole, there's a mysterious force that's going to blow up everything if it's unleashed.
No, it's a bit like, do you remember the Collector and the Sunmaker, the Doctor puts a plug in? It's a bit like that. You just take the TARDIS out, put the plug in, and it's all fine.
You're done.
Yeah.
And I think in this story as well, where they mention Skaro, and they mention that Skaro is in the future, and I like that. I like the fact that they're setting up, that whole adventure is effectively in the far future from their present time, and they're very good at doing things like that in these early stories, just setting out. Well, people talk about like building the universe and building people's imaginations. I like all of that. They're very, very clever writers that they put these little things in, and just seed them.
David Whittaker was the script editor and the writer of this, so he's got all that. He's got all that foreknowledge of the series as well, which is great. So he's got all that to work from, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just goes to show you that the best way to do it is give enough snatches that will excite the viewer to use their own imagination.
Yeah.
All you need is a line. And outside of Doctor Who, the perfect example I always use for that is the original Star Wars. All we needed is a line like, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars, or before the dark times, before the Empire.
Yeah.
Leave the rest of the viewer's imagination. We don't need a whole separate trilogy explaining about, I fought with your father, or the snatches that Alec Guinness would give in this. That's all we needed, and then we would build our own mythology in our head, which is always better than having it literalized and explained, which basically then limits all of the possibilities just to one.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't believe in prequels and all of this. And David Whittaker does it perfect here. Because that's what keeps the young viewers interested in the show, because they're letting their imaginations roam. And it's better to say, well, what could that mean? What's on the planet Quinnis and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Whatever they come up with is going to be 1,000 times better than the one single explanation.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And, we talk about that. We've talked about the fast track return switch, but I do love how Hartnell is demonstrating with the torch on how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think did it strike either of you as odd? I'm not going to say it was odd. Wouldn't it have made more sense for him to be explaining that to Barbara? It's like Susan should know that already. Explaining it to Susan of all people. But no, I know that's being kind of pedantic.
But it's interesting. The similar thing happens in the Space Museum when they jump a time track. There's another spring problem or whatever kind of thing going on. That seems to be a flaw in the TARDIS mechanism is springs, obviously. Yeah.
As a way to very quickly, like in about 30 seconds, explain to the viewer here's the reason for all the weirdness that you've been seeing, and it's just kind of like very much like this ordinary thing that you're already familiar with. It was a very facile way to make that connection. So that was fun.
And I do love as well where he puts his arm around Susan, the doctor, and he goes along the lines of, "I'm very impressed with what you've done here. Quite impressed, my dear," like that. And I was thinking, you tried to stab people.
he didn't see that part. He would have said he's even more proud of her. I tried to kill the caveman. You did a great job nearly killing Ian. Great stuff. Yeah.
That's what he meant, John. He meant, I'm very proud of the way that you didn't kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a win as far as the Doctor's concerned.
I also love the interaction between when the Doctor tries to explain to Ian, and then it becomes like an episode of Scooby Doo. They start laughing. It's like Police Squad. They should be frozen. Like that.
That was
kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Jumping around. Yes, that was
staring at the console together. And I do love that. The scene with the Doctor and Ian where they've lied to Susan and Barbara, and he basically says, there's no hope. Will you face it with me? To Ian, and I do think that's lovely because that's the two of them knowing that the end is coming, and Ian effectively taking the decision to stand with the Doctor and to just we'll lie to them just to protect them. It's very well
it's
done.
A great example. It's a bit like the similar example they do in the Daleks when they take the mutant out and they send them outside. They're very gentlemanly. It's right.
Yeah.
Don't look at the monster. Go out there. It's fine.
Yeah. And they wouldn't allow that now. There'd be uproar now. Wouldn't they go, oh no, that's not equality.
The Doctor would be crying probably. That'd be it.
Yeah. I'll imagine it done now.
Yeah.
Put some pants on, please.
The dialogue in this episode, of course, as Paul said by the script editor, is very, very strong, very effective.
Yeah, it is. It is really good, and I think I do like the way it ends as well because, as I said to you, when you've got Barbara and the Doctor sat down and they're talking to each other, because he goes over to her, because Ian makes that comment, doesn't he, to him about, I can read every expression on your face, effectively to say, I know you're not going to apologize, but effectively the way you're looking and the way you're behaving is your way of apologizing. And then he goes over to Barbara and, again, you start seeing more of it where he's starting to develop these rapport with Ian and Barbara, where he's effectively trying to apologize, but not quite able to do it. It's still foreign to him. So he's not quite getting there. And then she walks off. And I like the fact that they do that, because if it was done now, we know that would just be done. They would go, okay, right. Oh, they're happy again now. Roll on to the next episode. But I like the fact she walks off and they've done that. They have to have a further talk because there's consequences to what's gone on and what's been said. So that it's a beautiful scene between the two of them. And I really like that. And I do love, the Doctor putting the coat on Barbara.
Yeah. And taking her arm. Yeah, it's lovely.
Exactly. I think that's wonderful. And again, that's what I mean there. You're starting to get to a point now where it's like he actually is glad that they're with him. Him and Susan were getting along, and doing their own thing, but this extra element is becoming a bit of a joy to him. And then I love the way it ends with, the snow fight, and leading into Marco Polo and, a footprint.
Yeah. And that's all you get of Marco Polo. That's all you get.
That's all you get.
What's interesting, I like the fact that Barbara often gets dismissed as being a bit of a 60s woman, they're a bit sexist with her, but they're not. She's a very strong character, and when you get to the Aztecs, she's superb in the Aztecs, and they've obviously developed that further. And she's a very, very strong character, which I think is fantastic.
I mean, we talked about it, Paul, previously when we did An Unearthly Child, and we sang about how you have that scene where she's traumatized by what she's seeing. You know, I think it's the saber-toothed tiger scene, and she's seen someone be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, and the horror of what they're going through. She's still trying to comprehend that, they're no longer where they were. You know, don't know if we're going to be okay, we're going to survive this.
Yeah.
And you see to where we are now, that character is really strengthened, and she's a bit more, I'm not going to take any rubbish anymore. What I've been through, you know, I'm going to say my piece, and I'm going to stand my ground on it. And she is such a very good character, and it's really well acted, and the dynamic between all of them just works perfectly.
Yeah, that final scene, the final sequence, is a really well-written, well-acted scene. I think it's a very important scene for the show. I do have to say, my initial reaction, I still think the Doctor got off a little too easy. You know, even with Barbara, you know, that great when she just kind of goes off on him in the first episode. But I do have to say that, especially in that reconciliation scene at the end, I think that's the point where all four of them are united from that point going forward. There can be disagreements, but the distrust is gone. And that's the, you know, after this ordeal in this episode, Ian, Barbara, and Susan basically kind of returned to the way that they were. Their you know, their personalities, they basically kind of carried on as before. The Doctor did not. The Doctor is the one who did not come out of this unchanged, because from that point on, this is the Doctor that we know and love from this point. Not selfish, not so selfish, I should say.
Not so selfish, yeah.
Not so selfish, not so self-centered, not so openly antagonistic to the people that he's traveling with. More the Doctor that we know from that point. And this story and that scene was the signal for it. It's kind of like there's the Doctor before that scene, and now there's the Doctor going forward from that scene.
Yeah, so, I agree. There's a definite improvement in the character, and he does become much warmer. But even in Marco Polo, I think if you get the TARDIS fixed and get the key back from Marco Polo, he'd be off again. He'd just go off and leave them if he could.
Oh, really?
I think so. I think he's still quite selfish in the Marco Polo. I don't know if you agree with that, John, but he can be still quite ruthless.
Yeah, there are elements of it. Yeah. But, I mean, just teasing it out a bit, Gary, I mean, when you're saying that should have gone on longer, do you think it would have, say, worked if they'd gone, like Barbara and Ian had gone, look, okay, we know we're back on Earth. We don't know where we are. It's Earth, though. We don't trust this guy.
I guess what I meant is, like, considering what the Doctor had done to them.
Yeah.
In terms of what he'd accused them of, he was threatening to put them off the ship. Ian basically gave him a pass, because as he's blustering, as he's going to, you know, and the Ian says, I can read, as John, is your kind of analysis, I can read everything that's on your face. Basically, he gives the Doctor a bye with that. It's like, I get it. No need to say it. We're good. Yeah. And part of me, as I was rewatching it, was going, no, he does need to say it. Yeah. Which he does in a way in that final scene, but it's kind of like he still is not taking on. I mean, he comes out, as you said, with the beautiful line about, as we, you know, learn about others, so we learn about ourselves. And I'm not taking anything away from the beauty of that line, but still, I guess part of me would have want more of kind of just a little bit more of a cell phone. Yes, you know what? Yes, that was, you know, that was just way beyond. And I don't know, maybe, like I said, maybe I'm kind of putting too much of myself, you know, of what I want, as opposed to just kind of taking what I'm given.
I get what you're saying, because if it was done, say, now in modern times, they would probably done the next episode would be, there would still be that tension, and they would build in that.
I'll tell you what happened. Barbara's mother would have come in and slapped Hartnell on the face. That's what happened.
Yeah, you know, and they'd be on a dance floor in their pants, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's not that please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Doctor needed to be brought down or needed to kind of grovel more. I'm not saying that the Doctor needed to have kind of his dignity removed from that. I mean, I do think the scene as it plays allows all of the characters to retain their dignity, you know, toward each other, but you can still kind of retain your dignity while you're saying, you know what, no, you know, mea culpa, that was just a line I will not cross again.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, because effectively then it's a way for him further to learn. You know, he's learning about human beings. Yeah. He's thinking, well, okay, this is a line here. You know, I've got to learn. I've got to adapt. You know. Yeah.
I definitely there's a development there. But as you even look at Hartnell when he gets softer, there are moments like in the Reign of Terror when he has an argument into the Sensorites and it leads into Reign of Terror. And right, get off now. Don't care if it's France, England, Africa. Get off now. Go.
Yeah, right.
You know, so he's so very selfish. He's easily wound up, shall we say? Is the first Doctor, I think, a little bit. You know.
Yeah, the thing that sometimes, and it's hard, especially when you're watching these chronologically. You know, that exact scene, Paul. You thought, well, wait a minute. I thought the story I just watched like a couple of days ago, they were fine.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes those kind of, and I understood that, especially with the 60s, it's not just serialized stories, but it's basically one large kind of tapestry where it's one story that all lead into each other. And so it makes up a continuous narrative. And I get that sometimes you even have to kind of create artificial connections to kind of create a cliffhanger or like quote unquote Jeopardy, you know, that's kind of only for the sake of the mechanics of the show, as opposed to being true to the development of the characters. Like in that moment where, okay, I need an artificial way to kind of jumpstart connected to the next one. So let's say that the Doctor gets tetchy and tries to throw him out. And to me, I kind of more dismissed that kind of thing as more, that's really more kind of an artifice of the way the program itself is constructed, because you need to connect the stories to each other, as opposed to saying, well, no, that really did justify the Doctor wanting to toss him out. So I think you can, there's different ways you can look at it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, at the end of the Sensorites, it's more of a tantrum than anything else, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like kind of like Stephen's tantrum at the end of the Massacre, where he goes, right, I'm off.
Yeah.
You know, and then he comes back in 5 minutes later.
Because 3 people have died.
So, starting with you, Paul, what score would you give this out of 10?
This is an odd one for me, because I do like it and I enjoy lots of elements of it. And I think it's a nice way to tie up the sort of first 3 stories. If that was it, that would be very interesting. Doctor Who would have been a mild curiosity in a junkyard, literally, because there's only 3 stories. But it's an interesting. So I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I think. Yeah.
Gary,
I'm going to give the first episode a 6, the second episode an 8. So I guess because I think it's differentiated, because I think the way that they're directed, the way they look, there's more moments that resonate for me in the second part. So I guess on average, it would be a 7 as well. But I wanted to make that distinction between, I'm looking at it as kind of 2.
I agree. It's interesting. Although it's the same story, having 2 different directors does give it a different feel. I definitely agree with that.
And that's unusual. Do either of you know? I'm not really familiar why that was, because I mean, it wasn't unusual to have a single story, especially a 2-episode story, require 2 different directors.
I'm surprised it's not been directed by the next director for Mark Morris Hussain, or the director after that, John Gorey, or something like that, because you think it would be put together
just to link it.
Like a 6-parter would kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I mean, again, it's a bottle episode. I think it's nicely done. Yeah, the story can be a little confusing, being polite about it, but I would say I'd give it 6 out of 10. And it's one. You're right, Paul. I think with the stories before it, it just they link together well, and it's that Beginnings box set that I've got. I don't just do An Unearthly Child, the Daleks. I do all of them in that set as one. And I still always enjoy it. So, for anyone that's watching at the time, it's still keeping you hooked, isn't it?
It's such a shame there's no any episodes left of Marco Polo, because that'd be nice to go into that, And the same way you can watch part
that we know of.
Yeah, we know of. Yeah. It's under Philip Morris's bed somewhere, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that.
And it's interesting. Do the two of you think that they maybe should have attempted? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they had to do this 2-episode connector, but do you think that maybe they should have tried more kind of experimental, short, little kind of interlude stories, kind of like this? Do you think that would have worked, or this was kind of its time and that was it? And
I think they kind of did it a little bit similarly with The Rescue, didn't they? When they introduced Vicky, it was very much like a vehicle just for her. So it was like a small scale story a little bit. So just to introduce the companion, and this was to introduce the cast a bit more and the TARDIS itself. So maybe same kind of thing, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, it's any chance I get to have a story that's set in that fantastic set, TARDIS interior. I'm just hooked. And for me personally, that's why, when I was growing up and Peter Davison was my first Doctor, I loved all that bit with Castrovalva, the inside of the TARDIS, and all of that, and the Zero Room and everything. It's just
Tegan's room.
Yeah,
I miss all the brickwork, John, to be honest, from Invasion of Time.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I hate that.
Yeah. I like tripping up Sontarans as well,
Because because for me, when I see that control room and I see the chairs and the beds, that really reinforces the idea that was the Doctor, and at that point, Susan's, that was their home.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like us, kind of we get in our, car every morning, go to work, and it's primary as a travel module to get us from place to place. But nobody would say, well, the car is my home. But those kind of touches really made it seem, no, that's their home that travels around time and space. And I think when they abandoned that and just focused on, here's the control room with the console with nothing else but the roundels, it lost that feel, and I think that was unfortunate.
Yeah. I think there's one thing that classic Doctor, certainly Ellie Hartnell, having furniture in the console room, objet d'art, things the Doctor's collected, the odd chair, the ornament, the clock, all that kind of stuff is beautiful, and that's what's missing from current Who. It's just a white void. There's no character to it.
No hat stand.
You can't make no hat stand even. You can't even count the jukebox that the new Doctor's got. So it's it's not really the same. So you need stuff to give him character. But I did think what Shooter might add to his TARDIS control room. We'll see what happens.
I mean, the thing that pops into my mind is the scene from Planet of the Daleks, where you have the bed coming out, really kind of in that room that Joe lays the Doctor, but that's not really the same as you just said, Paul. Things in your travels around the universe that either people give you or that you collect, you want to kind of have them out, like just now putting pictures on a wall or something. It's kind of and that kind of I mean, it just. I wish they'd go back to that.
It's you're right, because that it feels lived in, doesn't it?
Because even in some like the Five Doctors, they have to get the chairs out to have the pineapple and the cocktails.
Exactly.
They have to do all that. And then where are they kept? In a cupboard? Has the Doctor got a garage next to the back of the TARDIS?
Exactly. Wouldn't it have been great, Paul, in the Five Doctors, when the Doctor and Susan walked in, he's like, where's all the chairs? Where's the clocks? And they actually made it, called it out.
That clock was worth a fortune.
Yeah, it's like,
when you're done with that, I'm going to sell it on Antiques Roadshow.
You know, the TARDIS then, you know, you didn't know how far it went on as well, did you? You know, it was, you know, it's just such a great creation. And again, having time in that world, it is just a joy. And you're right, Paul, because now I see it. I don't feel that joy for the TARDIS now. I don't, because I'm just thinking, I think the modern era, it feels more like, if anything, it looks a bit Star Warsy for me.
Yes.
It's got that kind of shiny white finish to it.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, the what I call the current iteration of Star Wars, or the prequels, where everything was shiny and new, and whereas I don't know, I like the TARDIS being a bit, you know.
Well, I don't think they've redone it again properly since the McGann movie, when they had all that fantastic furniture and stuff and all that, and all these kind of things you collected. Really, really nice. They did a little bit with Capaldi, maybe a little bit, but not as well as McGann, I don't think. But
it's a case of you know, style over substance. Good looking style in a lot of instances. That's why I resonate.
Shame we're not doing the Three Doctors. That'd be perfect.
Well, that's why all the new
But yeah, I think it's an interesting story, and I think it's such a shame that we don't have Marco Polo to continue with. But we can listen to the audio, can't we? We can and
we will be listening. We will be listening to the audio. That's going to be our next one that we do. So. You know, that's our review for this week. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Me, Gary, and Paul have had an absolute blast on this one. You know, and join us for the next one. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.